Let's take a quick look at the highlights of the past 7 lectures. Thank you, everyone, and welcome once again to the 8th ATO annual lecture, the first virtual lecture, virtual edition for us. It's the first for everything. 2020 has been a year like no other, and it's meant many things to many of us, to all of us as, as professionals across different spheres. And in the tumultuous times, a common thread has been the need to reach out across the uncommon obstacles we've had to face this year, to overcome those obstacles and achieve our goals. Here we have the pleasure of welcoming 3 different speakers. Some of the speakers we would never have been able to have join us because of the distance, the divide, but we have the pleasure of 3 speakers. We have architect Kate Mann from Ennead Architects in New York. We have architect Joseph Conteh, and we have architect Papa Omotayo, and we're very, very pleased and very proud to be able to present them to you and to hear from them. So before we call on our first speaker, I'd like to just run you through the format of today's event. So we have 3 speakers, but we also have a short presentation, a digital presentation on how to collaborate, how architects and engineers can collaborate, using Revit, using software, and achieve more. Because this the years to reach and do things this year. So those are the 4 presentations we have today. But right in the, we have 3 quizzes. And that's where we get the audience to really participate in. So we ask that you stay logged in because there are tech prizes to be won with the correctors. So there will be 3 quizzes with 2 questions. And the first person to answer both questions gets our tech prize. And it's a tech prize because 2020 is the tech year. And we will get your prize to you wherever you are. If you're in Hong Kong, you're in Italy, you're in Lagos, you're in Kano, you're in London, we will get prize across to you to be able to do that this year. So to answer the questions, when the quiz is posted, you put your comments in the chat box and address to the quiz master. You will see his name. His name is Deji, D-E-J-I. D-E-J. So he will post the quiz and you answer, please answer, respond to him from you. The speakers are going on. We want you to post any questions you have in the general chat box addressed to everyone. We will pick up your questions and we will direct them to the speakers. The question and answer session will take place right after the 3rd speaker, so we can have all the questions together, but as they occur to you, please go ahead and drop them. So I'll be calling on the first speaker in a minute. I'm just getting her bio up. It's ladies first, always. Can I have her bio up, please? Okay, so our first speaker today is an architect, an American architect out of New York. Kate Mann is an associate principal, project designer, and co-director of the Center for Government Work at Ennead Architects, a 200-person design practice based in New York. Ennead is internationally recognized for design excellence, principally in the public sector for civic, academic, and cultural institutions. Ms. Mann has more than 25 years of experience designing award-winning architecture around the world and is currently working on the new United States Consulate General in Lagos. She was here with us last year. She attended the lecture last year. Her work emerges from a strong interest in place and the diverse architectural expressions of cultures, climates, and traditions. Driven by intense curiosity, she connects individual projects to the larger issues of our times, engaging in questions of the city and our collective future. A collaborative designer, Kate knows that an inclusive process can push the boundaries of what is possible to deliver architecture that is unexpected and transformative. Ladies and gentlemen, right where you are, please put your hands together and receive Miss Kate Mann. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here. It's a nice privilege of the strange situation that we're in, the silver lining that we're able to be together virtually. As Victoria mentioned, I was there in Lagos last year and able to attend this lecture in person. So I'm excited to see some of you again this year, who I met last year. And we really enjoyed our time working in Lagos and getting to know ATO over the past several years on the new US consulate in Lagos. I want to talk a little bit today about collaboration, and I'm actually presenting in one of our collaboration softwares called Miro, which is sort of an idea board that we've been using, and I'll talk a little bit about how we've been using different tools during this time and how we at Ennead think about collaboration and how we work. So hopefully there'll be something interesting there for you that might apply to your practice wherever you are in the world. But first, a little bit about Ennead. We're 250 people, I think, headquartered in New York City with a small footprint in Shanghai as well. And you can see from these photos of our offices in New York, we're in the World Trade Center. We just moved last fall, but collaboration is really important to our design culture. You can see there's material everywhere, whether it's models, printed of drawings, material samples, sketches, and you often see us all together sketching over something, talking about ideas. So you can imagine this past 9 months at this point has been somewhat of a challenge for us since we've all been working remotely since mid-March. The past 6 years, we've been working internationally on a series of embassies and consulates for the US government. These are some that are under construction now in Turkey, Mexico, Thailand, and the Bahamas, so all over the world. And of course in Lagos, which we're very excited about. But these projects have taught us a lot about collaboration just because of the sheer complexity of them, the scale of them, and the need to bring together really diverse expertise. So why collaborate? We feel collaboration is really, really important for us as architects in this world. It's no longer enough to rely on your architectural education. The kinds of challenges that we experience as architects today really require knowledge across disciplines. When you think about things like climate change, which architecture can participate in, but won't solve alone. So we really need to bring together those diverse voices around design problems. And we find that with our embassy and consulate work, which really does require diverse expertise beyond what you might see in a normal project. So we've learned to develop a process that really engages that expertise in a very open way so that it informs the design. So our process is based around this idea, which comes out of the Silicon Valley design thinking. but it's really about convergent and divergent thinking. So the front part of the process is really about getting as many ideas and as much information as possible on the table. So the idea of maximizing choices. And then what we do in the design process then is really curation. So we're working towards a singular design, which involves editing out those ideas which don't fit in and amplifying those that do. So that's important to our process. We feel like the more open-ended you can be at the front of that design process, that's where you really find innovation and creativity. The edge of what you didn't believe possible actually becomes more possible through this process. And the way you see that, or the way we used to do it, I guess, pre-COVID, was we would all get together in a room. We did a lot of site tours, typically for these work around the world. We'd visit the site with a group, and that group would include our design team, so architects, landscape architects, engineers, but also the full client team, which represents those same disciplines, along with local architects and users, people who live and work in the place that we're designing. And we'd both visit the site, but also really try to get onto the wall a series of ideas, starting with some background research, and then as the week progressed, sketching through different concepts. So we left that 1 week charrette, we'd really have both a starting point for the design, but also a common vocabulary and understanding about where the particular challenges and opportunities were for each of these projects. And here we are in Lagos in the top row here. And then back in New York. So it involves large groups of people with really diverse expertise. And even in New York, our in-house team is quite large because these are large projects that really take a lot of effort. So whether we're all working together on the computer or in the office on the bottom left, actually making a mock-up of that V-shaped column you see behind me for the new consulate. So it's been a challenge to adapt overnight to this new world, but today it's actually, we're a series of little faces on boxes more often than not. So we see everyone on the screen every day. We spend a lot of time in video conferencing, and it's been remarkably seamless in some ways and remarkably personal in other ways. You're seeing people's individual spaces. But we definitely miss that benefits of being together and sketching. We found a few tools that help us navigate that divide, which have really helped. These are some of the tools we use. So in addition to the normal 3D modeling like Revit and Rhino, there's a series of tools that I personally have found very helpful during this phase. One is Miro, the digital collaboration tool, which is actually the one I'm presenting in now, but we also use it to sketch with the team and to charrette together. Modelo, which is a cloud-based 3D model viewer, which is quite user-friendly. And then my personal favorite, if you know me, Morpholio Trace, which is an iPad sketch app, which I've been using just as I travel around the world, but has also been very useful here, working from home where you don't have the same kind of physical resources. So this is what our day typically looks like now. We started in a video conference. We're all together on the screen, but we're also all with the team live in Miro. So sketching through ideas, we'll actually take a screenshot of the Rhino model or something like that and drop it into Miro and keep sketching together. So it's been very helpful in moving the design forward collectively. It's the closest thing we found to being in a room with other people and putting things on the wall. And it's also great for presentations. I actually developed this presentation and using Miro today to present it. Our design process also is very iterative, so we're always moving around between 3D models, sketches, and ultimately trying to get to that final product. So using Modelo, which is this 3D viewer, lets us move around easily, capture quick views, and then sketch over them and develop that iterative process. It's also great for client use because it's very user-friendly. It's something that anyone can log on and look at in the cloud without downloading. And it has a graphic style, which is less of a rendering and more of a color field, so you can make it as realistic or as abstract as you like. And the third one, my personal favorite, is Morpholio, particularly Trace, which is part of their series of products. But the idea of not using physical trace paper anymore, this is the only sketch app we found that actually has the layers, so you can iterate as you develop your design. And it's really excellent because you start already with a drawing that's in a digital format that you can share with email or across the internet. So we don't know what the future will bring. We hope to all be together soon. And I understand in Lagos, you're actually back in the office, so I'm happy for you. But what we imagine is that we'll have a future that involves the energy of being together again for in-person collaboration, along with taking some of these digital tools that we've all come to rely on so much. I don't think any of us are willing to give up some of the advantages and conveniences that we found, for instance, of being able to participate in a lecture like this. It certainly made our world, expanded the borders of our world, and enhanced some collaboration partners that would have been more limited in the past. I hope we don't lose that aspect of it. But I think to end, I think the most important thing in the end is all about people. This is a quote from an American comedian, Amy Poehler, but find a group of people who challenge and inspire you, spend a lot of time with them, and it will change your life. And we really believe that the partners who you work with and having that dialogue is the key to success of these collaborative discussions. And we're thrilled to find you all in Lagos to be our partners.
Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you very much. I think I picked up a couple of things, from what you said. One where you said diverse voices are needed to solve today's problems. That is so true today when people are learning to find their voice in a digital space and learning to use digital tools in a different way to connect. Because in our field, in the field of architecture and engineering, people see buildings as impersonal things, but you need personal and very human connections to bring these buildings together and to make them work, and it's important that we have learned, and we are continuing to learn, to use these tools, not just to do things, but to also connect and to draw from our collective experiences, our collective knowledge, understanding, and expertise, and to bring that together to still achieve great things. Thank you very much. We're picking up some questions, and we'll be throwing them out. We'll be sending them to you towards the end of the presentation so you can respond. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure, and we look forward to working with you again and again over and beyond the project that we're working on together right now. So definitely. I see the quiz has been going out and everyone's going Brazil, Brazil, Brazil. And everybody who posted their answer on the general chat is not going to win anything because the instruction was to post it to Deji. So if you posted on the group, let's see if you can still get your answers across to Deji. So you have a chance to win one of those prizes. Post everything to Deji. Okay. So we will be going to our second speaker right now. And our second speaker is someone who has taught all of us to come out of our designers' cocoons. Sometimes people come to you and ask you, what exactly do you do? Who are you architects? We just know architects as these crazy people back in school who slept in the same clothes for 3 days, played loud music, and never really mixed up with anybody, But this architect has taught us and showed us the importance of reaching beyond our comfort zone to collaborate, to pull architects to make a difference socially. Our second speaker is an award-winning architect, designer, writer, and filmmaker. His work strongly focuses on exploring the nature of culture and the context within contemporary Nigerian and the extended African condition, locally and globally. He's a strong believer in creating work through cross-disciplinary collaboration and participation. He strives to find new possibilities for creating nuanced visual narratives in Nigeria's and Africa's urban centers and beyond. He is the founder of a WhiteSpace creative agency and creative director of MOE plus Art Architecture. He currently lives and works in Lagos, Nigeria. He's an award winner. In Lagos, he's won awards for his essays, an essay titled Where Strangers Meet. And he's also won awards for applied foreign labs and essays as Best New Director for OMI, a fashion film festival in Milan, Italy. It's an exhibitor Making Africa at the Guggenheim in Bilbao, and Best Curator at the Nigerian Expo, at the International Fashion Showcase in London. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together as we welcome architect Papa Omotayo.
While we're waiting for that, we have a question for Kate. Laulu is asking, what inspired the screen of the consulate? What context went into it?
So the screen of the consulate, we were looking at a series of sort of regional crafts, architecture, traditions, arts and crafts, as well as art. And rather than focus on any particular one, we got really interested in the idea of geometry as this sort of universal or very common language that underpinned so much of what we were seeing. So we worked with that geometry or the idea of a geometric pattern to develop the screen. And the other thing about the screen is it's part of a passive solar control strategy. So it's both the structure of the building, but also screens the facade. And that shape actually works really well for both the south and the east and the west as the sun moves around the building during the day.
Hi. Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, thank you for this. My apologies for the technical difficulties. Hi, my name is Papa. Thank you for allowing me to talk. I think what I'm just going to talk about really is more about how we work and how we think as an organization, and really what our approach to I guess architecture. I mean, as an organization, we span the entire practice of from everything from art to architecture, and I think that comes from this belief in like cross-disciplinary participation. So for us, it's really important that as an organization, we don't limit our focus to the, I guess what we call the kind of like Western idea of architecture, because I feel like, so much of the idea of architecture is sort of being focused on like Western training, I mean, Western principles. And I think for us, our approach always comes from the point of view, like, how do we engage in making in a way that I guess feels authentic, but also allows us to be more open. So the practice is MOE plus architecture, and I think collaboration is sort of part of our DNA, and more important to us, I guess, is about this idea of not collaboration, but within the context. So for us, specificity is critical in how we think. So for us, primarily, we always like to think, okay, we start from this point of view of the continent, and we move to the country, and then we realize that even within that, right, we speak for a very kind of specific area. So, and even within that, we're sort of like located somewhere within this idea of Lagos. And within Lagos, there is this higher, there's these multiple layers of its history, its population, its diversity. And I think for us, as we operate, as we think, and as we engage in the type of work that we do, all of these layers are critical. And critical to that is sort of these ideas for us is about how we interweave between these layers of infrastructure, community, public space, economy, and ultimately what kind of architecture represents an extent within Lagos or within the urban space is about this idea of attraction and this intersect between public space and urban interaction, and within the deeper layers of like community, infrastructure, economy, etc. And then again, as I said, like zooming down. So when we talk about work, we talk about collaboration. Even our collaboration is at the moment even limited within a sort of a specific zone of Lagos, which is predominantly around Lagos Island, which is where we work and which is where most of the people that we collaborate with also existing. So I think what I'm trying to say is that when we talk about collaboration in our office, we're very conscious that even within our approach to collaboration, it's very narrow. So it doesn't really represent like the ideas that speak to a wider city or a wider country or a wider continent. So we're always conscious about where we focus and where we think about collaboration. So for us right now, for the last 10 years, we've really been investigating how we participate, how we collaborate within communities at Lagos Island, amongst designers that are operating in the space, amongst makers, sculptors, artists, and other people. And that kind of allows us to sort of follow like these 4 principles about context, material, people, and form, and how that ultimately informs our point of view. And when we think about our point of view, like one of the things that is critical to us is this idea of like the dialogue that exists within culture. So this project is really speaks to one of the things that we did where it was a design project, and the brief was how do you create architecture in public space that also speaks to economic mobility for small businesses. So what we did, instead of trying to think about it from the point of view of a building, is we worked with some local businesses and artists, and through a program with a collaboration with an organization in the UK called Create, we created a series of billboards to sort of figure out, instead of these businesses like spending loads of money to like showcase themselves, it was a way to now take their businesses, infuse it, collaborate it with an artist, and then have the artist now collaborate with what is ultimately like expensive public infrastructure, in this case a billboard, and create a moment of dialogue where you have the average Nigerian being able to sort of participate and engage with this conversation between this very small business that ultimately can't afford a billboard and this artistic expression, which is normally kind of locked behind buildings, museums that are very inaccessible in this environment to the average Nigerian. And then, I guess just running through that theme again is just this idea of constantly trying to think about the unmeasurable. And there's a great quote for us when we think about our work, and which is about this idea of building, beginning with something unmeasurable, going through this measurable process, which is, again, the process of architecture from a very technical point of view, whether we're talking about the tools of CAD or like the conventions of design, whether where you get your references from. But at the end, it's about like creating something that is ultimately about connection, and it's about dialogue. And that dialogue for us exists in like multiple forms. Again, I think you had mentioned how important this idea of cinema and film is to myself and the organization, and how we draw reference from that. And I think for us, cinema is important because like what cinema does is kind of focuses this idea of like creating these moments that become immeasurable, but somehow stay connected to you for a long time. So they're taking massive, massive chunks of history, of culture, of people, of assumptions, and creating these moments, whether that's in a 2-hour movie, 1 hour, 30-minute movie. But within all of that time, there was always these moments that sort of define the story. And for us, like thinking about architecture in that way is always really, really important. And how in doing that, the past becomes integrated into that. And when we think about what is immeasurable, and when we think about collaboration, we think about there is a really strong historical narrative to collaboration. We think about we think about Picasso, and his, well, at the time he didn't acknowledge it, but then how influential something like African art was to him. And in essence, the meeting of these two people, the meeting of these two worlds, and how that created this really significant moment in art history, and how that changed the trajectory of what art can be. And for me, these are the things that always inspire us to always move beyond architecture, always move to like working and collaborating with individuals. This is the Tadarando Church, and one of the things that we were looking at when we were also thinking about collaboration is like the act of making and the materials of making. There's a really exciting scene in the movie Eyes Wide Shut by Stanley Kubrick, which again, and I'll touch on it a little bit later, where so much of that film and so much about filmmaking was about this need for collaboration. And there is a symmetry between that and architecture in terms of how many people are involved. But I think what is really exciting about like the referencing cinema, again, is how it's able to sort of define these moments, whether that's through the collaboration with a composer, a cinematographer, and also in this scene as well, the city. The city is not just a prop. The city is almost like a collaborator in building the tension, in defining the narrative. And how these moments of perspective, change the conversation and kind of allows you, the audience, to sort of, see something new. And for me, that's what's so beautiful about this idea of collaboration. We think about, the history of Ralph Ellison and Gordon Parks in their essay series, and how that was so critical in terms of these two artists coming together and collaborating and creating something new. We look at the Phillips Pavilion in 1958 between Corbusier and Zanis, the composer, and how this entire project, or this entire pavilion, came from a collaboration between the artist and the composer, where the premise was, how do we translate this immeasurable, emotive thing called music, which within it has some very specific structures and standards, but how do you create something new from it? And like, for me personally and for elements of our team, because we have a very young team, hip hop culture is really, really important in how we think. And, again, that kind of energy that comes from that, like that sort of grit that comes from that urban engagement, and that comes from that essence of something being more than one thing is really critical. And I think, hip hop culture, how it grew from a very urban space, like urbanism was definitive in its creation, and how it now moved beyond that, and how it translated into fashion, it translated into language, it translates into now a very specific visual aesthetic that more and more we're seeing it dominate like popular culture. And again, all of these processes come through this understanding that, it's about the collaboration between the art form, the music, in how the fashion is expressed, how the words are created. I'm just going to move through some of these slides quite quickly because I know we're running out of time. I mean, we also think about, Demas and Roku, the New Culture Collective, as an inspiration. And, Demas, was one of the pioneers in this understanding of the importance of cross-disciplinary collaboration, where he worked through art, through sculpture, through architecture, and, worked extensively within communities and artisans to create what for us are like probably the most definitive, some of the most definitive expressions of Nigerian, and for me, like global architectural practices in terms of understanding how to create place through participation within that place. And that's something that drives us deeply as an organization, about this idea of making to participate in creating communities, not objects. I think one of the things that we've been trying to like underline in our work is how we move away from this idea of this linear expression of architecture, which is about architecture as a product, which for us feels very wasteful. And how do we move to this sort of integrated, not just the surface idea of like the language and the application of tools, but just this interrogation and this engagement with people and communities, and how that allows for new modalities in the cities. And I think that's one of the things that we're really wanting to challenge. And I think that's why our focus is looking at how to reframe the public realm through collaboration. It's this idea of how the city is shaped predominantly. It's very sort of, it's not even post-colonial, because I think we kind of exist within still the same systems of adoption. And what I mean by adoption is like this idea of transplanting ideas from other places within our own realm, as opposed to kind of interrogating our own realm, collaborating within those that exist within those realms to sort of define what those new possibilities of engagement can be. And I think that is really important to us. I mean, I don't have time. This was a film that worked on, that I think you mentioned earlier, which was with the fashion designer Makio, which won Best New Director at a film festival. And again, like in working with a fashion designer whose focus in making of material in terms of the materials she made, which is about bringing back these dyeing techniques of Ashoke Adire. Again, us working with her was through that collaborative process of understanding that this is somebody that is engaged in this process of community and communal making, which speaks to our own process, and how that work is now translated into the context of the city in a way that is not trying to speak outside of the language of the city itself. And I think for us that is something that is really, really important, and how we find these sorts of new visual narratives. And then again, as I mentioned about how, even in the conversations that we're having, we're still working within a very narrow, within the narrow window of area at the moment. This is the 5 Kauri Creeks. This is mostly Lagos Island, Southwest Ikede. This is a project with artist Warren Natasha Ogunji. Again, is how do you get people to engage and collaborate in the process of making. This is similar to that other project we talked about, which is about like this idea of memory and myth making and creating art in architecture in the public realm. This was a project that actually happened in New York at the Armory Fair, which again is like, how do you get people to engage and participate? And you know, we work on the interactive projects, the fair designers for Artex Lagos, and part of that is one of the projects we developed within that is how do you know, how in this environment, how do you get people to interact in art, and how do you get them to participate, especially in an environment where, you know, going to art galleries, going to museums is not something that is a reality in most cases for the average young Nigerian. But again, you know, in a fair that is global in origin, how do you make it part of the community that it's engaging with? And then again, through this project, this is the previous Falmo Roundabout, which is a project we worked with, collaborated with the artist Polly Alakija and the local community to sort of take the space and create a moment of contemplation. Again, that was with her, the Chibok Girls Society, and then, you know, with Lagos State. And I think one of the things that we really wanted to do in the collaboration on this project was to think about not just like a space that is new. I think what was important to us was to create a space that felt like it would always existed. So part of us was like interrogating what function the space already has and speaking with those people that actually most of the time just go to the space and hang out and asking them to participate in the making of the space. So it wasn't really about trying to do anything new. It was about trying to find that moment that already exists and capture it. And then, so these are elements from the space a few years back. Again, we're always looking how we get people engaged in public space. So this is another project, which is the Street Art Festival, that again is focused on the Brazilian quarters around Lagos Island, that happens every year. And again, it's like, how do you bring people to interact in space, using art, using architecture, and getting these conversations going and seeing what comes from that. Meanwhile, at the same time, looking at elements of heritage, looking at elements of culture and architecture and how to speak to that. So in terms of like how we collaborate in the design process, it's pretty much the same thing. It's like we're working on form, but the form is developed from the idea of mythology and memory. So, you know, in this instance, this was a project for terror culture, which for us sort of wanted to poke fun a little bit at this idea of this Guggenheim Museum in New York as being like the pinnacle of like architectural education. Everywhere you go, someone's going to tell you about Frank Lloyd Wright and all of his amazing work. Meanwhile, like the reference points within our own environmental context are often ignored. So for us, it was like this moment of linking this traditional head tie to that language of modernism that was, I guess, defined and made definitive by the Guggenheim Museum in New York, and then trying to figure out how to now sort of subvert that into a new cultural institution here in Lagos. So again, it was about thinking about things and these conflicts that, and these questions that we were trying to relate to. And then again, this was a project that was looking at this idea of myth and memory again. This is about the Shikiri people. So the king in Warri, they wanted to figure out a way how to document and create a museum for the story of the Shikiri people. And I think one of the things we wanted to do was not to create a building for them. And what we decided to do was to take the existing palace walls and ultimately imagine that in the old days, when the canoes would come down the river, they would like leave them out to dry. And we created this kind of same principle along the palace wall. And as you sort of walk through these sort of side turn canoes, you now get to hear about the history. So again, that kind of came through a collaborative process with the fishermen and the people from the communities, and trying to understand how they want to engage in the stories that speaks to them in their history. Again, this is an art gallery in Lagos Island, and this was the existing building, and it was really about how this was really a simple idea about it. How do you create a moment within this very chaotic space to make people stop and just think that, you know, there could be something interesting within this space, and this is sort of how the form came about. And moving on to some other similar projects where, you know, we're working with local weavers, and then from working with local weavers to do a piece of furniture, something comes out of it. And then finally, during the pandemic, one of the things we tried to do was to collaborate with a bunch of doctors and a few creatives to come up with some prototypes and open source solutions for hand washing. I think this was some of the solutions we came up to for the intensive care units. And I think one of the things that is really critical that we like to speak about is this idea of creating a line. So when we talk about collaboration, what we're really saying is that every interaction is something that is passed on. So in our thoughts is, you know, when we say, oh, we designed this project in the office, it's the history of all the people that came in the office. So the collaborative process doesn't really stop. It's continuous, and it's really participatory. So thank you very much, and it's been great to talk to you. I'm sorry if I took too much time.
Thank you very much, Papa. I have one question for you. So if the guy with the chains wasn't you, which one of the people was you?
He never allows me to say his name. All I can say that it's not me. Because the first time
not
he showed
you.
up, everybody asked, is that you? And I have to keep telling people, no, it's not me. It's just a very, 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 he used to be a very good architect. but
Thank you. That was
really,
really interesting.
How we see people. And for us, it's really important that, like on the onset, like when we talk about this, what architecture is in our office, it's really about, you know, like in our office, you don't need to be an architect to work here, for instance, right? Because for us, we feel that you can design is something that there's so many tools in this day and age that can facilitate.
And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Victoria Ikede. Victoria is our BIM manager. That's a BIM manager within the office. She's also the assistant QMR, that's a quality management reviewer in the office. So she has a quick presentation on collaborating using software. Victoria, you're ready?
Yes, I am. Sharing my screen in just a minute. Okay. Hello, everyone. Hope you can all hear me clearly. Um, just as a kind of overview, I'm going to go over some of the tools that can facilitate collaboration. Well, typically around a BIM perspective. I like to avoid using the word BIM because I found that it's become this buzzword that sort of scares people away from talking about using technology for collaboration. I was really excited by some of the things I saw in Kate's presentation with Rhino and using Morpholio boards and all of that. Um, so I'm just going to touch on some of the tools we've used in-house, as well as some potentials that could be explored, just thoughts for consideration in general as an industry. So the first thing that really helped us this year as a firm during the start of the lockdowns was collaborating real time. We had to work from home like everyone else at the towards the end of March. And one of the first challenges we had was working on the same file at the same time. As a firm, more often than not, we find that we are on projects where we need more than one person working at a time on a file to be able to get our work done in time. And one of the most amazing tools that was able to help us was BIM 360. It's an Autodesk product. I'm not publicizing Autodesk specifically, but as far as solutions go, I think this is the most popular one. And what it did, we were able to do collaboration even while working from home. So several people could work on the same projects at the same time in different locations without having to set up any robust infrastructure or any complex system to do that. Another amazing thing about this software that I think is underutilized at the moment is the automated documentation system it has. Like was mentioned in my intro, I'm also part of the quality management system we have here in the office, our ISO 9001:2015 system. And one of the major things that we find we have to do is document our processes. With tools like these, because it's all in one place, you find that even things like reviews, transmittals, and so on, it has a way of automatically documenting that for you. And I know at the moment, we always think in terms of short term when we're working on projects. We're not really thinking about situations where maybe people in the project team have left the firm or relocated, or even like this year where we're working remotely. So it's one of those tools that just sort of helps keep everything in one place, both collaborating and also documentation wise. This is a visual example of what can happen when we start to all work in a kind of multidimensional approach to design. We can start to see things more clearly and even perform visual and automated clash checks. Some of the tools you could use for that are Navisworks, Solibri Model Checker, and even Revit. It's good if everyone can begin to think of design in a kind of multidimensional perspective rather than just two-dimension as we have at the moment. Because what happens is we have a lot of mindsets regarding technology and getting on board this BIM train. It's expensive, it costs a lot to train, but the truth is we spend a lot more time on revisions, dealing with inefficiencies, checking out clashes and mistakes on site. Even at the moment, our coordinations are still done in 2 dimension. And so we're relying on the expertise of the consultants present. So there's lots of human error that can take place. So as part of our BIM drive within the firm, we are trying to move as much as possible to multidimensional modeling. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a couple of slides. Yeah, so what do I mean by multidimensional modeling? At the moment, we're thinking about drawings, right? We just have a visual representation of the spaces and their relationships. But if we start to think in a kind of multidimensional way, we think about modeling the geometry, but also the time, the cost, the sustainability aspects, and how the building functions in use. And until we start to think about our designs in that way, we'll find ourselves spending a lot of time correcting mistakes, which is pretty much the case at the moment. So we're really trying to push this idea of moving away from just focusing on two-dimensional modeling and thinking in a more multi-dimensional perspective. One of the other things which is really fascinating right now is computational design. And I've personally explored this. These are some of the things I've tried to explore using computational design tools. As complicated as some of these images might seem, it didn't take more than 15 minutes to get them done. For those of us who are wondering what computational design is, it's this exciting new bridge between essentially computer programming and design, where you're not dealing with blocks of code, but visual nodes that actually allow you to work with data from the back end. One of the other things we're really looking at as a firm now is data and how that can inform the work we do. So one of the biggest problems with collaboration at the moment is that people are working in their comfort zones. And I mean this in terms of software domains. So some firms are using Revit, some firms are using AutoCAD, some firms are using ArchiCAD and whatever works, SketchUp and the rest of them. If we start to think in terms of computational design, then we will be able to work with the back end, which is actually the data that everyone is producing. So to us, we're just producing visual things that look nice, but we're actually creating data. Everyone in the profession is creating data. With tools like this, we can sort of go back and interrogate the data we're all putting out. And the good thing about it is, if you start to think about design from a data perspective, you're thinking more in terms of information that is already optimized to give you the best result. What we do right now is you try and come up with a concept creatively. Maybe you sketch it out on paper and then you start to play with that form, and that gives rise to something else entirely. When you're thinking computationally, you're sort of starting from the data. So if, for example, from some of the participatory events and things that Papa has done, they now know that in a public space, people like to gather in certain configurations. You can feed that data into the system and have that inform the design. So it's kind of thinking from the end to the beginning or something like that. So it's really exciting as a field in the industry, and I think it's something I'll continue to explore in months to come. Another thing that's great about computational design is that we can start to go back to our local materials and forms and think about how to re-engineer them. So there are already some practices that we have in our vernacular styles of architecture that we've kind of abandoned or maybe found not to be as modern as we would want it to be. With computational design, we can sort of go back and study those processes and see how we can optimize them to use them more effectively. The next thing I'm going to talk about is 3D printing. These are some of the prototypes we've tried out in our office to just sort of experiment with some of the buildings we have. Now, the interesting thing about 3D printing is not only can you use it in a kind of large scale now, so these are images of real buildings that have been 3D printed, but we can also go back to the idea of looking at our local materials, like I mentioned. So what really caught my attention with this particular imagery is that it really closely resembles our traditional style of using Adobe and mud to kind of build. So I think that there's a real opportunity if we're able to go back and really investigate how we can fuse the practices we already use, like in the villages, and use these new technologies to optimize them and make them more relevant to our time. Another interesting project for me with 3D printing is this one. It's called Project Egg, and I think it started out this year at the start of the lockdowns. It's a Dutch project. From my experience, it takes a really long time to print an object. Even the smallest 3D print could take about a day to complete. And they needed to create this nice looking structure as a pavilion with only 3D prints. So what they did was they created an open source design and sent it to several people. So several people in remote locations came together and printed the parts, which were now assembled in one place. So one aspect of collaboration that I personally find very fascinating is this idea of open source design. In the computer science industry, there is open source applications and coding where you start an application and then you release the source code to the public, and then several other programmers can work on it and improve on it. And in design, we sort of still have, maybe because it's creative, we have an attitude of sort of keeping it proprietary and keeping it to ourselves. But if we make it more open source, we can release our designs as a kind of source code, so to speak, to the public. And other professionals or even non-professionals, regular people who actually end up using these objects or these spaces can work on it, improve on it, build it the way they want. And it's more participatory that way. And with 3D printing, so if in a project like this, we don't need to worry about how it's going to get built, maybe because the materials are not available, or in this case, it will probably take too much time for one person to do it alone. When you have that design as open source, then several people can print it off in their different locations, and then it can be assembled in one location, or it can even be assembled in several locations, as the case may be. So with this kind of new forms of manufacturing and prototyping, we can really start to think more broadly in the way we collaborate and in how we build things and bring them to life. The last thing I want to talk about is gamification of the construction industry, which is something that's becoming more of a trend these days. If you've attended a virtual exhibition in the past couple of weeks, that's an example of what I'm trying to say. It's been around for a while, the idea of using virtual tours and experiencing realistic environments in 3D. But in the construction industry, we're still really not tapping into what's possible in terms of how we can use those multidimensional models we've created to really go back to the site, for example, and interact with our buildings in a way that is just more exciting to my mind. Because if you, for example, have a problem with your piping and you're trying to find the source of the problem, it's a lot more seamless if you have that model that you can just superimpose in an augmented reality kind of way and just sort of see what the problems could be, than to start breaking a wall or demolishing to find out what the problem is. So apart from just the visual aspect, which is really what it's being used for at the moment, presentations and so on, we can really start to think about how we can do this.
Sorry, could I?
Some of our problems. Okay, sorry, I thought someone was talking. So these are just some examples of some tools that can be used to create reality capture and virtual reality and augmented reality. They're really, some of them are more commonplace, like your handheld cameras and your phones or drones, and then some of them are more complex, like LiDAR helicopters and so on. We tried this on one of our projects, a project we did for House on the Rock. It was an as-built documentation of the building. And so we just used a drone to capture several angles of the building and then fed that into a software that was able to give us basically a three-dimensional version of the building. The good thing about this is if we extend it and take it to a virtual environment, then other people can come and experience the building as part of like a virtual tour and so on. But one other aspect I feel like we're underutilizing is using this technology to preserve our cultural heritage, like buildings from Damaswanko that have been shown. in a couple of decades, maybe those buildings would have degraded or we would no longer have access to them. If we document them with technology, then we make it more accessible to people both now and even years from now. So preserving cultural heritage is one of the biggest applications for this technology. We also use this to do a virtual site visit. This is one of our projects, New John Baptist Church, where we sort of use a 360 camera to, it's distorted now because I'm playing it on a slideshow, but really you can sort of view this on YouTube with VR goggles and have a holistic immersive experience. And we can use this in several ways. You don't actually have to travel to a site to investigate the site or to view the site if you're using technology properly. So finally, this image is from a training session we held earlier this year, and it's part of our plans to help with the way we are currently working in the industry, to help other professionals with the tools that they use to make it more collaborative for everyone. So this was a training on Revit for MEP professionals, basically trying to get them to think in this multidimensional style of modeling. And we're going to do more of this in 2021 for more professionals with our sister company, ATO Studios. And the plan is to help as many professionals as we can to leave the 2D environment and start thinking in a more holistic, multidimensional way. So what does this mean for all of us? We should start thinking more holistically about the way we work. We should start thinking more of open source, thinking more of collaboration over competition, more of life cycle thinking. It's not, the building doesn't stop at our desks when we're designing or creating it. It extends to the end of the building's life cycle. And if we start to think about things that way, then the technology, the cost of the technology will not be the thing that concerns us, but really what value we're able to derive from it. So thank you for listening. I hope that wasn't too complicated. So I'll pass it on back to Ugo. Thank you very much.
Somebody asked if Papa Omotayo is a Lagbaja. And I'm wondering, is there anybody here who doesn't know who or what Lagbaja is? So for the uninitiated, okay, you don't know, Kate, okay. So you have to Google that. And Lagbaja, I think in Yoruba, it means, it's sort of like an anonymous Mr. Anybody. I think that's what it translates as. But Lagbaja is a musician, a very creative, very talented Afrobeat musician in the mold of Fela. So you can look him up and you should find some videos on YouTube and you will become initiated. Victoria, are we ready? Let me see. There was also a question, just a minute. There was a question for you while we're waiting for the information to come up on the screen. There was a question for you, Kate. Somebody was asking about the creative process in your office. He says, I can tell it's iterative and communal. The unmeasurable, it is iterative and communal, but I wonder how the purity of the initial ideas are retained. Is it a master artist-student relationship, or is it a case where everyone comes together to fine-tune or alter the eureka moment of the idea or the solution? Essentially, how do you go about the midwifery of the office's projects? Examples with projects you've executed. Okay, examples with projects you've executed would be nice. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think the collaboration, there's an interesting tension between the idea of collaboration as an architect, how do you involve so many voices, or in this case, even in the office, a group of 20 person in a design effort. It can't be designed by committee on one hand. You don't want, a collage of everything randomly coming together. It has to be an orchestrated effort that ultimately creates a singular legible vision in the finished product. So our process, is a hybrid in some ways, almost I think of myself more as a symphony leader, of the orchestra, sort of trying to reinforce and work with the team so that we're all going in the same direction. So there's a clarity ultimately of the vision. But for Legos, for example, we started, we did an incredible amount of research looking at different things, in Lagos, in Nigeria, and even, all over the world, and thought about a range of issues, including, resiliency, sustainability, design, all of these things coming together. And ultimately, the process is one of distillation. But if there's a clarity to that idea, it enables people to participate so that whatever anyone's working on helps to reinforce the big vision. So I think that's the key, is creating that clarity of vision and being able to engage everyone to their best ability towards that.
And I think that's really the bedrock of collaboration. First, communication, and then you are able to collaborate. You cannot collaborate effectively if you're unable to communicate. And it's the bedrock of architecture. That collaborative work, doing things together, and, ideas, bouncing ideas off one another, because that's how it gets better.
Yeah, you have to trust the process too. I mean, there's a leap of faith, where you don't know where the process will lead. So you have to believe that it will lead somewhere in order to be comfortable with a very open, creative process.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We'll take more questions subsequently. I think we're ready. Victoria?
In a few minutes.
In a few minutes. Okay, so I'm going to take a couple more questions. This question is directed to Papa Omotayo. How can a startup firm ensure collaboration in the Nigerian AEC industry?
What does AEC mean?
Architecture, engineering, and construction.
Oh,
How can a startup firm?
I feel like I should know. I mean, how do you start out? I think you just need to know what you want to do, and what's your interest, which area is your interest lie. I think in the sector right now, there is a lot of opportunity for specialization. Can you hear me, by the way? Okay.
Yes.
There's a lot of opportunity for specialization. And I think, instead of thinking about just being an architect and doing all kinds of work, perhaps it makes more sense to think about the type of projects or type of speciality that you want to do, and then start collaborating with maybe bigger firms that may be doing stuff like that, or other institutions. So whether you want to, maybe you're interested in hospitals, or specifically your interest is in hotel and leisure sector. I think that's, for me, I think that's where I would recommend people think about right now, instead of trying to just be an architect and compete with everybody. It's like, figure out which sector within architecture that you're interested in, and so like try and become the specialist at that. I think we're starting to see a change in the industry here, because right now, I mean, whether we like it or not, a lot of the specialized types of buildings, we don't actually have the expertise tends to be like brought in from abroad, right? If we're honest with ourselves. You're kind of asked to partner with this company in America or South Africa, who's specializes in hospitals or something very, very technical and specific. So that would be my recommendation. Like maybe just try and corner a specialty, which is the most important.
Yes. So our last speaker for today describes himself as an ambitious and conscientious architect. He's an RIPA chartered architect, qualified and registered with ARB since 2009. He has worked with several reputable London-based offices, including internationally renowned Eva Jerichner Architects. He's currently a visiting lecturer at the University of Westminster while exploring a PhD research of the great Nigerian architect and professor Demas Woko's work. He has interest in practice, teaching, researching, writing, and engaging with Africa and the diaspora on matters relating to culture, rural, and urbanism. Previously, he assisted the work of Aki Africa in Ghana on a conservation and heritage guideline for a tropical modernist building. In recent years, he has managed the architectural private practice JUKO Designs. He has in-depth architectural experiences in residential, commercial, and major office refurbishment, mixed use, and retail sectors. I think what I read from here is somebody who is not just your conventional architect, but somebody who's able to explore all of his creative sides. He has also researched and written an architectural piece commissioned online for The Guardian, first of its kind, around Africa in 10 buildings, directed by Joe Harker during Week in Africa series. You can find that available on the internet. I've read it, it's fascinating. You want to just dive into the pictures, and we'll be diving into this presentation right now. Thank you, Joseph, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, thank you, thank you. Little did I know when I was writing that or sending it, you're actually going to read. I probably would have edited a bit, but thank you very much. I've had some technical issues, a lot of technical issues, but I think thinking about this theme of collaboration to win, I've always been, it's actually made me think more in a kind of reflective mode. So it's actually taken me 10 years to really think a little bit about where I have been and what things I've been up to. But I think also with what's been happening today, trying to get on this call and my MacBook not trying to work and rushing into your office here, trying to get going, I think it's really also good to acknowledge that side of collaboration. So the thing about collaboration at this point, or can be summarized in a way as an opening statement, as resilience, everything that you potentially cannot, circumstances that you cannot foresee will happen. And you actually really need to stay with the process. I think I had Kate mention that at some point. And actually, based on that, I was thinking about putting a first image on basketball, because I'm an avid basketball player, watch for the last 2 decades. And, but I started to think that you need individually, you need to work on yourself. You need to have competition. You need to have failures. You need to go back and think what you didn't do right. You need to recalibrate your steps. And I think all of this stuff, whilst they're happening, it sort of happened isolated, but you really need to work on all those things incrementally. With that being said, collaboration to win, reflective mode, and resilience, I think I'll change my lecture a little bit. So I'm going to go right to the end and then maybe show the lecture itself as slides, because there's a lot of videos at the end, and I think I just want us to watch some of those footages over the last 2 years. They're basically actually I go back to 2016 when I met Dimas. So I've known Baba Dimas Nwoko. He's a Prince Dimas. He lives in a really beautiful town called Demuju Ogboko, which I've had a lot of practice to, but after you live there for a while, it's fine. And I just had a different rendering from living in London in the West. And for the last 2 years, I've been here in Nigeria. So, but I want to show you, I don't know, can I share screen? Do I have the facilities to share? Yes? Yes. Okay, fine. If I play something, it goes on? Sorry, the tech goes another. The tech goes another on my side. Can you see this video? Yeah?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Yes.
So okay, so the clip you've just seen was the first time I collaborated with Ikede Africa in Accra, and sorry, okay, and what was really interesting about the clip you've just seen is the fact that that was the launch of a modernist building called the Children's Library in Accra, designed by Richard Nixon and Boris in '66, commissioned by Kwame Nkrumah. But we were trying to do a heritage and guideline plan. And it was very interesting to how to work with the local schools. There's 3 schools you saw there, and actually all the children had to collaborate together. And we had them to draw on the floor, to draw on the table and on the wall. And I think that starts the idea of me just actually traveling and being domiciled. So most of my architecture work is being domiciled in an African country for a while, because I guess the way I can describe the thing I do is I actually like to go in search of knowledge and actually be very close with that knowledge, not only historic knowledge, but social, cultural observation of that knowledge, and then share it with an audience, with a small group, with a wider group. And actually that it's very critical to put that at that point. Another thing I've collaborated this year is with CPDI Africa, which is founded by Madili Okumabua in Atlanta. So during the COVID pandemic this year, we went online and we just had a kind of a really interesting methodology. So the first thing was actually do a lot of interviews, and then we chose 20 intern students, architecture intern students, and they were all around the continent and also in the diaspora. So we had students from Brazil, we had students from Haiti, from South Africa, we had students from Kenya, from the UK, and the majority of it from Nigeria. So we had 20 interns and we had 5 university lecturers. And we spent 10 weeks through Zoom just teaching, everybody teaching to their strengths. So there's a professor called David Hughes who wrote a book on Afrocentric architecture over 30 years ago. An Albright scholar, traveled the length and breadth of Africa, did this book. He was on the panel. We had Edward Dane, he's an architect who is also a professor, was on the panel. We had Dr. Oluwatoyin, who is a professor and expert in Yoruba architecture. And then I brought in after spending 2 years now with DIMAS, my own side of what I learned. So we did 10 weeks, and then we did an additional 2 weeks to give them to design. And at the end of that 2 weeks, this is some of the ideas they came up with. We were teaching along 5 elements: materiality, spirituality, the process, the aesthetics, and culture. Culture is a big thing for me. I think most everything I do, actually what Babadimas Nwoko does encompasses culture. Culture as not just a way of life, but actually something that is very specific to a place. And once you move from one place to another place, that culture itself really changes. There are similarities, but culture is something that really informs a kind of more day-to-day political way of how a place can structure. So I will show you, let me share screen again and show you another video. Okay. And then if you can see the video, let me know. Can you see this video? Can you see the video? No. It's not sharing. Okay, I gotta share. Sorry, okay, I forgot to press the share button. All right, can you see the video now? Okay, what is this thing here? Right, okay. So this is one of the students' work. Let me get the volume. And sure, this was basically looking at coastal architecture. So we got them to look at their individual architecture from wherever they are. So if you're Igbo, you studied Igbo architecture. If you're Yoruba, you studied Yoruba. If you're from Haiti, you study Haitian architecture. And she was really kind of more interested in the roof. And so she was trying to see if she can reinterpret the roof hot typology, but actually also use different motifs. We got them to do a research center and a cultural center. And this is what Nomi, one of the students, came up with. And this material can be found on CPDI website. Okay. So that can be found on the CPDI website. Whilst I'm here, I'll try and show you another one video of, if I'm able to. Okay, go forward. Please be patient with me. Okay. All right. I'll show another video again of someone who worked with your Igbo architecture. And I actually kind of like this process of working because we really don't know what the outcome will be. And this is all done within 2 weeks. The cultural center is influenced by the Diogba's hat, the chief's hat. So they're picking elements from their culture. And they have, this picture now shows you the actual center. So these are more kind of leisure areas and common rooms and gazebos. Okay, so, I mean, you start to get, this is how we actually spend, I would say I spent 4 or 5 months this year of the pandemic. So this is my pandemic collaboration here with 5 other professionals. And I think actually I learned more from their own expertise they were coming with and learned some more from the students because the students were really engrossed with this. I'm gonna go on to showing you videos now with my work with Demas Nwoko, which is the 3rd part. I would just let me see if I can share the screen again. Where am I? I'm sharing. So let me show a video here. This is, can you see the video? Okay, this is when I met Demas in December 4th, 2016. And this is me meeting him nearly 2 years later in his hometown, in Uboko. And we've been speaking for 18 months and we've had just the most incredible conversations. And what really kept me going to try and secure a grant, I got 2 grants, one from the Graham Foundation, one from the Churchill Foundation in London, which I just want to acknowledge and say thank you very much for that platform. But Demas just keeps saying to me, keep going, you'll get the grants, just be patient. And I think over 18 months, collaboration also has different strands. I thought to myself, he's an older man. He should be sort of more worried about for us to do a book of what his architecture has been for the last 50 years. But he was more patient than I was. So this is the first time I'm meeting him in the village. The volume might not be a lot. It's not sharing. Okay.
The video isn't showing.
Okay, beg your pardon. It says stop sharing. Okay. Okay, I need to share it, but in a different screen. Okay, I'll get the hang of it. Sorry. Is sharing now? Yeah? Okay.
Hold on. Yes, excellent. It's showing.
Yeah, so this is his house. And there's something very spiritual about this moment because he's going to pat my back as he's blessing me. And this practice for me, when I've looked at this back, at this thing again, is what you will do for generations. So his father or his grandparents or older people would have done that to him. And in that moment, I didn't really realize what's happening, but living around the village for 2 years, the best part of 2 years, it's just incredible. I mean, I think everybody should go to this house in the village. It's part of the slides I have today. If I have time, I'll just flick through them, but that's that first encounter. I've got something else sharing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. 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 Where is that? Okay, I've got another video. Can you see another video of rain?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just run these videos. So this video is showing the inside of Baba's house. He has this thing called the Izobolo, which is also the impluvium. But actually, I was fascinated by it. Even if you have torrential rain, there's no flooding within the house. So I recorded this thing at so many times of the year, say for the start of the year, in the spring or in the summer, and then the rain really just contains within 1 meter. Baba there's another film of Baba actually saying this. And it gives me a lot of reverence. I often say to myself that God actually is in this house because you have a really good connection with the sky through this impluvium. And just the materiality, just the form, just everything that Baba designs within the space, the drainage system. This plant that you see here has been there for 30 years, right? I mean, Baba designs for his natural habitat. He designs for people, he designs for the ventilation strategy in this house is just really incredible. And I would just used to come and stand under this thing sometimes and just really be transformed to another place. I'll keep going with the videos. So this is another one. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah? I need to share?
Not yet. Yes.
Not yet? Okay. Okay, sorry. Okay. Can you see? No? I'm not sharing. Okay. Then I got quite a few things going on. I've got a few things going on. Okay. Just bear with me a moment. Share screen. Okay. You see the video now? Okay. All right. Okay. We will be resilient. Okay. This is an event last year. Most of the professors we did the intern this year came to Uboko last year in April, and we did a 2-day symposium. So Baba is just talking. Just the amount of rainwater that this flower collects, because the impluvium is tapered. So it really, the water that pours in is at the shallowest point. And here, Baba is just saying that this plant was taken outside. To his left is Edwardine, and then to his right is Baba's daughter. And he's just an incredible, incredible man. He's an incredible teacher. During the time I was there, we recorded a lot of, so I went to record Okay, this is Baba's wife, Nene. Round up. Okay, all right. So I've been told to round up. I will show probably one more, which is also going to be Baba and I making a portfolio for one of his exhibition last year for Art House, an exhibition for a collaboration with all the Zaria rebels or Zaria Society members. Him, Bruce Onabrak-Pierre, and Yusuf Grillo. So this happened here in Lagos. But before that, Baba insisted that we make a portfolio to put the drawings and the sketches in. So this is, I don't know, can you see the video for this? Yeah? No? Okay, all right. All right, let me see. Again, I have to share again. Share screen. Okay. You see it now? Yeah, okay. So he's 84 years old, and here we are making a portfolio to transport drawings to Lagos that he's done maybe. So I'm in the room with him, making this. This took us a week to make, just a portfolio, and the sheer determination. Everything has to be right. The grains underneath, the glue underneath, we had to really mix the glue a few times. The paper, the leather, the bend in the leather, the groove at the side of the leather. I mean, he measures, and he's partially sighted at this moment. Measuring how this thing would work, because he's worked everything in his mind. His mind is just, but at the end of this, what he's going to say to me, I think I probably will read it as, he will turn around to the camera and say something to me at some point. Okay, now I found the volume right at the end. I really want you to hear what he's. So ladies and gentlemen, I'll leave it there. That's the great Demas Nwoko, and that's where I am with my African journeys right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joseph. This is like a dream come true for many people. Dimas Nwoko is somebody we studied back in school when we looked at the history of architecture and focused on the history on traditional architecture in Nigeria. And you can't talk about traditional architecture in Nigeria without talking about Dimas Nwoko, and the fact that you have been able to work closely with him and to document that process, and for us to be able to see some of that here, is a real privilege. I'm hoping that some of these videos you will avail us. We can have them to put together with the lecture materials so that all the participants will be able to enjoy them properly. We couldn't hear some of the video, and I really, really wanted to hear what his voice sounded like. So thank you very much, Joseph, for sharing this experience with us. Thank you very much. There was a side conversation going on. Somebody sent a message to the panelists, and he was talking about the facade of the proposed US consulate, and Kate was answering about that. So Kate, I wonder if you would share very, very quickly in 30 seconds, let's say, talk about that facade, because I think some people might want to know what it's made of. Thank you.
Sure. So the material is actually a precast, you know, in the factory. High performance concrete, so has a very fine finish and a custom color. We're really worried about the exact color, that it's not too bright, you know, in the sun, and also wanted to get something that would hold up well with conditions in Lagos and smog and things like that, so that it will look good, you know, in the future as it does when it opens.
Thank you very much. I just had a lot of, not questions, we have a lot of comments, you know, people saying, oh, what a blessing to talk about Dima Smoko, and let me see, we had comments on, yes, also on the facade, some more comments on the facade. So I think that response responded to most of them. And then of course, a lot of the quizzes, a lot of the questions on the quiz, a lot of the responses to the quiz. We're very mindful of the fact that we're approaching the 2-hour mark. So I'm going to very quickly take on the last quiz. I'll ask the quiz master to post the last quiz, and then you go to Q&A, post the responses there. And then I'd like to take, yes, sorry, I think there was a question I hope everyone has been seeing the polls and you're responding to the polls, because the questions are really important. And right at the end of the lecture, the whole event, we will have a quick survey we'd like you to respond to. That will help us, you know, in the future for other presentations. So I want to thank everyone, but very quickly, after this quiz, Quizmaster, please post so we can get the responses, because we have to announce the winners. But in the interim, if Shola, no, not Shola actually, sorry. Okay, we'll be taking some remarks from our Managing Director, Architect Ikede Basifuja. We'll be taking some quick remarks from her before we take closing remarks, and then we'll announce the winners of the quiz. Thank you, Ikede.
Okay, well, thank you very much. You know, I think this has gone much better than we could have hoped for, seeing as our enemies, our internet providers, decided that today was the day when they would not work, you know, but thankfully we had a backup, and I think I'll say we have done pretty well. Internet in Nigeria is not yet a birthright, you know, so we are doing the best with what we have. I mean, this has really been amazing for us. 3 really great speakers from very diverse backgrounds and diverse thought processes. We've had the opportunity of working with Kate and Ennead Architects over the last couple of years, and seeing the way that their process works in our office, and you know, basically trying to incorporate some of that in the way we ourselves work here, we ourselves collaborate. You know, it's almost old school, you know, some of the ways they collaborate. We had the opportunity of working with them last year, and I think late the year before. At the end of the day, sometimes it is old school that works best. You know, people talking with each other, people doing freehand sketches, you know, people overlaying trace on top of what they're doing, people building models, building actual models. It was a, you know, an amazing experience for us, and it's something that we are incorporating into our practice. So Kate, thank you very much for sharing some of that knowledge with us this afternoon, morning for you, I know. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We know you're a very busy person.
Thank you. It was great to be here.
Yeah. And then, well, I'll confess, Papa Omotayo, his work precedes him. I only spoke with him for the first time this morning, but Ugo knows him and knows of him, but I know his work. I know his work. And, you know, I am not an artist by any stretch of the imagination, you know, but most architects, most of us, you know, are influenced by art and the cultural experience. And we've learned a lot this afternoon about the connections that are important between people, the connections that are important between people and spaces, between communities. And I have to thank Papa for reminding us of you know, some of our reasons for being, some of our reasons for doing what we do, you know. And I love the connections between, you know, his work, what he said about cinema, you know, creating moments that become immeasurable, you know, that, you know, stay connected to you for a long time. And many of us have those experiences. You sit in a cinema hall for 1.5, 2 hours, and for decades, you remember, you're thinking about those things. And I love that connection to the architectural experience, you know, to the way we should be thinking about our work, because our work is about people at the end of the day. Our work is about cultures at the end of the day, you know. So Papa, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that insightful presentation. Yeah, and last but not the least, Joseph Conteh. 2 years ago, when we had our annual lecture, we had actually invited Joseph to speak. We wanted him to speak with us. And unfortunately, his schedule did not work with our timing, you know. But 1 week after that annual lecture, he gifted us with a private lecture. And for us, that was you know, so it was just us in the office and him up in our library. Was a fantastic experience, you know. And, you know, now we have the opportunity for him sitting here with us, and you know, able to tell us about the work that he has been doing. We are thankful for those connections, because, you know, sometimes we are, I won't say overrun, you know, but we are very outward looking when we talk about architecture, think about architecture here in Nigeria and indeed in Africa. And so some of the work he does, some of the work Papa is doing, you know, is helping to teach us to look inwards. There's so much here, you know, for anybody who's traveled by road in Nigeria, you know that there's so much to see, there's so much diversity. And in working with Kate and Ennead last year and the year before, it opened my eyes. You know, sometimes it takes somebody else to come and help you see, you know, opened my eyes to all these elements, you know. So like telling you a summary, they looked at everything. They looked at seashells, they looked at crabs, they looked at everything. They looked at all the kind of stone we have naturally. They looked at, you know, the granite that occurs naturally, you know. And you know, for me, it was an amazing experience, because, you know, like sometimes you say, oh no, people here can't work with you know, a certain type of stone and all of that. So you limit yourself to concrete, you limit yourself to block work and all of that. And you don't push the limits of yourself or push the limits of what our people can do or what you can force them to do, you know. So thank you again for speaking with us. I have to acknowledge a couple of people who have tuned in to listen to us this afternoon. First of all, say thank you to everybody who's taken time out to join us. I want to give a special shout out to Frederick Scholler. Frederick Scholler is calling in from Paris this afternoon. And we worked with Frederick Scholler from about 2014 on the French diplomatic campus in Abuja. And that was completed, at least the first phase of it was completed last year or the year before last, So we appreciate his joining us this afternoon, to listen to what we are saying. A few years ago, he was the speaker, and also talking about some of his work and some of his thinking in all that he does. I'd like to say thank you to all those who have joined us this afternoon. Thank you very much for making out the time. And last but not the least, I'd like to say thank you to the team in the office who have made this happen. It's always good to sit back and let it be somebody else's fault if things go wrong. Well done to everybody for putting this together. The remote working and remote collaboration is here with us to stay, remote plus hybrid and all of that. And we're embracing it. We have no choice, So thank you very much, everybody. And I'll hand you back over to Ugo to wrap this up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ikede. And I'll just reiterate what Ikede said. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming and staying for 2 hours. I know what it's like if you're in person. You go out, you get some coffee, you get some tea, you get some nibbles, and there's great food sitting out there in the lobby waiting for you. But right now, all the food I can offer you is great pictures of food right now. So it's a real testament to your tenacity, your resilience, your engagement, your interest, and we don't take it lightly. We don't take it lightly at all. Like Ikede said, internet is not our birthright in Nigeria. So the fact that you're using all of that data to tune in and participate in this lecture, is very, very encouraging. It's inspiring. I want to thank everybody. I've seen names that I think must come from Joseph's hometown in Sierra Leone. Senegal, sorry.
My Salon people are on this.
Yes.
Thank you very much for supporting.
I've seen all the names. I've seen names that sound French. I've seen names from all sorts of places. I want to thank everybody for participating in this. We're going to close in a minute, but not before I announce the winners of our tech prizes. And the winner of the first prize for the first round of quizzes, drum rolls, anybody somehow? Laolu Gani. If you're there, I don't know how to find somebody's face. But Laolu Gani is our first winner. I was hoping I would find a winner in some place where we would be really challenged to get a prize across to you. Maybe somebody in Mauritius, and then maybe I would have to go across to deliver it myself. The Ikede would let me. But we have our second winner, Oluwatobi Akinlolu. Congratulations for our second winner. And the last winner, Abisola Okeshiji. I hope I got that right. Abisola Okeshiji. Thank you very much. We have your details. We have your email address from Eventbrite, and we will be contacting you later today to obtain your addresses so we can send your prize across to you. Thank you very much for participating. We have over 68 posts on there on the Q&A. Everybody was answering questions like wildfire. And I have to confess, I didn't know all the answers. So we want to thank our quiz master, Deji, Adejuigbe for putting these questions together. I'd like to thank Victoria for doing all the tech behind work, and thank our management, Ikede, our chairman, Ayono Jide, and all the staff for the huge sacrifice. And thank you, everybody. Last but not least, our speakers. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm hoping that we will be in touch more in the future to explore opportunities to collaborate and really do great things. 2020 for me was not this type of year, it was this type of year. We learned new things, new skills, we did great things, and I think that's a huge hurrah for everybody. Thank you very much, everyone. And unless we have anything else to say, I want to say thank you as we draw the lecture to a close. Thank you, everyone. Please have lunch on us. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.